So our tool cabinet is done. Now the fun part, we get to start hanging up the tools. In this episode, I'll show you how to make a really versatile rack for chisels and gouges. In addition, I'll show you a smart way to hang up your spoke shaves and how to make a custom holder for your marking gauges. In addition, I'll show you how to hang your favorite dovetail saw in style. Stay tuned.
We're bringing some of our most popular woodworking content right here to our YouTube channel, starting with this, Mike Pekovich's Hanging Tool Cabinet Video Workshop Series. If you want to build along, we've got links to the plans below, and if you like this type of in-depth content, head on over to findwoodworking.com and sign up for a free 2-week trial of our unlimited membership. You'll get access to over 75 of these long-form video workshop series, and honestly, a whole lot more.
I'm going to start by attaching the tools to my doors. It's a lot easier to do that flat on my bench than it is attached to the cabinet. Now I've got both a swing out panel for storage as well as the original door panel itself. I'm going to start there. For everyday tools, you may want to think about putting it where you can reach it easily. Back here I'm storing some carving gouges that get out maybe once a year or so. This is a real simple chisel holder, works great for gouges and chisels of different sizes. I've got a stepped hole here because some of my gouges are nice and small and they fit in really well, but larger gouges won't fit in the smaller hole because the handle doesn't quite reach it. So I did a stepped hole to accommodate larger handled chisels and gouges, and it still works well for the smaller ones. When positioning the holders, the one thing to watch out for is that you give yourself enough room to get the tool in and out. If this were up here, I'd be out of luck, so I'll pull it down just to make sure I can lift the tool up enough and get it out. These holders start out as a strip of wood. I lay out the hole spacing and head over to the drill press. I use a larger Forstner bit followed by a smaller one. To make the cutouts, I head over to the table saw. It's a good thing to keep in mind that we're only screwing 2 1/2-inch thick panels here, so choose screws accordingly. I'm going to mount my spoke shaves on one of the swing out panels in the case. In this case, I'm using the tools themselves to help me figure out the exact location. I'm starting with my longest spoke shave, because I want to make sure none of the tools overlap the hinge side of the door, otherwise it won't be able to open all the way. I also need to consider the distance between the supports. May as well throw everything in there. I make these in pretty much the same way I make the chisel holders. Let me show you how. I start off at the drill press, drilling just single through holes instead of the stepped holes. Then I'll head over to the table saw, making the initial cut, followed by the bandsaw, where I'll make all of my angled cuts. I cut a little tab top and bottom for attachment. So that opens fine. That I don't like so much. So what I'm going to do is rip a little bit off of this door and add a little hardwood strip to this door to give me a little more room. I'll mark this door now because I'm going to go ahead and take it down and install my marking gauges over here. Unlike other holders, my marking gauge holder is custom fit for each specific tool. When I screw this in place, I also want to take into account what else is going to be hanging on this panel. I wanted to try and get my bevel gauges there, and a 12-inch rule is not quite going to make it. I've got another spot for this, and it leaves me an opening for something else right here. Let me show you how I made this. Because this is the most customized holder yet, I laid out the slots directly from the tools themselves, marking the widths, then heading over to the drill press to drill the stopped end of the slots. One of them actually required a stepped hole to accommodate a collar on the gauge. After that, I headed to the bandsaw to make the straight cuts. It's no coincidence that this cabinet is starting to look like my old one. I like to keep all the tool layouts the same so I know exactly where to grab to get the tool I need. All right, I'm going to handle all my squares with a really simple holder. It's just a block with a kerf in it, and the square just slides right in place. It's really cool. One thing to keep in mind with this kind of holder is you need access on the slot side of the holder at least as wide as the blade. This looks like it's positioned really far into the case, but I need that distance in order to slide her out. It's looking kind of cool. I'll go ahead and mark those locations and get those in place. These marks are actually telling me the overall length of the block I need in addition to the length of the kerf. Cool. I'll handle all my other squares in that same way. To finish off this panel, I'm going to put my drafting triangles up in the corner. I've got a cool little block. It's just a little rabbited block cut to the shape of the cutout in the triangles, and that's going to secure it. I'm using a similar L-shaped block to hold my protractor head and my scrapers as well. So the last thing I'll show you is how to hang up a dovetail saw. It's a little bit funky with that little circular cutout and everything, but I've got a cool way to handle that. All right, the first step in hanging up a dovetail saw is to make an oval block that fits inside the handle recess. Once you've got that, you'll need two other things. You'll need a dowel to keep the saw from pivoting too much, and you need a little flapper to keep the saw in place. By the way, this block needs to be the same or slightly thicker than your handle is. To make the block, trace out the shape using the saw handle itself onto a piece of stock. Head over to the bandsaw and cut it out. I stay to the outside of the line because I'm going to fine-tune the fit later on the belt sander. By the way, when sawing small parts, leave it as long as possible. It keeps your hands away from the cutting blade. I make that little flapper in pretty much the same way. After that, mark the location of the dowel. That works well. We'll go ahead and trim this down a little bit. And I'll screw on the flapper, which will keep the saw from coming out. Just rotate it around to take the saw out. There it is. A little clunky, but it'll do. Go cut some dovetails. So I'm just adding some stop blocks in the gallery for some of my shorter planes, and also in the back of the drawers to keep them from going into the case too far. This is really easy to do because I built the back in two pieces. The top, obviously, we glued and screwed to the case, but the bottom I cut off at a 45-degree angle. This is basically going to act as a French cleat. This is going to get screwed to the wall, and we're going to do this first because this case, especially with the doors, is really heavy. The last thing I want to do is be trying to hold this thing up with one hand and screwing it to the wall. This makes it easy. Still probably going to need two people though. First, I'm going to screw this to the wall. That'll allow me to then rest the case on top of it and hold it securely. Once the cabinet is in place, I'll go ahead and screw through the back directly into the studs in the wall. That should be plenty strong to keep it in place for years to come. Well, that's about it. I got a little more work to do. I think it's going to be a while before I really get moved into my new case, but it's feeling good. I think it's a nice addition to my shop. You should give it a try. Make it your own, put your own twist on it. You're going to have a case that's going to last you for years to come, or at least until you get some more tools.